Item 27 is the city deciding what it is going to do with the second Monroe County grand jury report. And before anybody runs off in whatever direction they already believe, I want to slow this way down and be fair. This item is not any new criminal charges. It is not a vote to adopt every single grand jury recommendation exactly as written. And it is not, or at least it should not be, a chance to relitigate the same arguments forever. What it is a resolution asking the city manager and city attorney to take certain recommendations from the winter term 2026 grand jury report, review them, explain what can be done legally and practically, and come back to the commission with options. That includes policy recommendations, possible code changes, possible administrative changes, timelines, and a public process. So here's the plain language version. The city has said some of them may already be happening. Some may be legally difficult, and some may need more analysis. This resolution says, okay, then show us. Show the public which ones are legal. Show the public which ones are already being done. Show the public which ones need a vote. Show the public which ones need to be changed before they can work. And show us a process for following up. This is about whether City Hall responds to a public trust issue in a way that people can actually follow. The grand jury report looked at several parts of city government. It talks about the city's organizational structure. It talks about planning and building regulations. It talks about the planning board and variance applications. And I know that sounds like inside city government stuff that most people just tune out, but it really does affect everyday residents. When the city's rules are confusing, everyone feels it. When the permitting process is hard to understand, people feel it. When someone has to hire an expensive professional just to figure out what the code means, people feel that. When staff, boards, applicants, and neighbors are all trying to work through unclear information, people feel that. That's really what this comes down to. The grand jury report says the city has made changes since the earlier concerns were raised, but it also says there are still structural and procedural issues that need attention. One of the big concerns in the report is the city's organizational structure. The report talks about layers of management, reporting lines, and unclear responsibilities creating bottlenecks and making accountability harder. I want to be careful here. A grand jury report is not the same thing as a management study. It is not the same thing as a full operational audit. So I would not just take that and say, okay, reorganize the city tomorrow. But I also wouldn't dismiss it. If a second grand jury is saying there are still questions about how the city is structured, who reports to whom, how decisions are made, and how accountability works, then I think the public deserves a clear response, not defensiveness and vague reassurance, just a straightforward answer. The report also talks about land development regulations. This is where a lot of people's eyes start to glaze over, but it is one of the most practical parts of the whole report and a part that I'm intimately familiar with. The report says the city's planning, building, and land development rules can be confusing. They can be inconsistent and hard for people to navigate. Even our folks in the planning department, every month whenever I go sit down and talk to them, we talk about changes that need to happen in our code. Because not everyone is a developer, not everyone has a land use attorney on speed dial. Not everyone knows a planner that they can call. Sometimes it is just somebody trying to fix a fence or improve their house, or figure out what they can do with their property, or understand what's happening at a planning board meeting. People should not need a decoder ring to understand city code. And I do not mean that as a cheap shot. I just think the rules should be clear enough that people can understand the process that they're expected to follow. The report also talks about planning board procedures and variance applications. And again, I want to be fair, because planning board members, including myself, are volunteers. We are appointed to represent the community. We're not all supposed to be professional planners, land use attorneys, or architects. That's not the point of having a citizen board. But the decisions we make can affect neighborhoods, property rights, development, safety, and long-term character of Key West. So training, ethics, conflict standards, and clear procedures aren't an insult to us. They would be support. They help us do the job well. They help applicants know what to expect. They help residents trust the process. The grand jury report also raised concerns about variance applications moving forward when documents may be incomplete or inaccurate. That is one of those things where I think most people, regardless of politics, can agree on the basic principle. If an application is not ready, it should not be pushed through a public hearing as if it is ready. That protects the applicant, that protects the neighbors, that protects the staff, it protects the board. It also protects the city from wasting meeting time on something that cannot be evaluated properly yet. And as they said in the last meeting, that was not standard, what we saw in that October meeting. A lot of these are being based on what was one instance. But we need to make sure that that one instance doesn't happen again. So what does item 27 actually do? The resolution says the city supports further review, public discussion, legal review, policy analysis, evaluation, and implementation efforts for certain recommendations where they are legally permissible, practical, feasible, and fiscally responsible. It does not say to adopt everything immediately. It does not say to ignore the city charter, and it doesn't say to spend unlimited money. It says take the recommendations seriously and come back with options. The resolution specifically mentions a few areas: possible review of management structure, a citizen advisory committee or similar public process, review and simplification of planning and building regulations, planning board training and procedure improvements, transparency in planning and variance proceedings, and procedures to make sure applications are complete and properly vetted before hearings move forward. This is where the city either turns a report into a working document or it lets it fade into another file somewhere. What do we know from last month's discussion? We know there was a lot of pushback. The city attorney explained that Key West has a strong manager form of government. In plain language, that means that the commission sets policy direction, but the city manager runs day-to-day operations. So if a recommendation crosses the line into commission trying to directly manage staff or operations, that has to be handled carefully. We also know the city attorney said some recommendations may conflict with state law, some may already be required, and some may require a charter process or some other formal change. For example, the recommendation about prohibiting ex parte communications was flagged as a legal problem because people have a constitutional rights to communicate with public officials. So again, this is why the response cannot be adopt everything. But it also cannot be, well, some of this is hard, so we're done. Those are not the only two choices. There is a responsible middle here. Take each recommendation, put it in a public chart, explain whether it is already done, legally impossible, needs to be modified, needs an ordinance, needs a charter change, needs funding, or needs staff work. Then bring the actual actionable pieces back to the commission. That is how I would approach this as a commissioner. I would not want a symbolic vote that sounds good and goes nowhere, and I would not want a defensive conversation where every recommendation gets brushed aside because one part is legally complicated. I would ask for a public-facing tracking document, as Commissioner Haskell did, not just an internal memo, not just a conversation at the dais that people have to decode while watching a 3-hour meeting. A real tracking document, each grand jury recommendation, the city's response, the legal status, the department responsible, the next step, the estimated timeline, whether public input is needed, whether a vote is coming back to the commission. That would let residents see what is actually happening. And if the answer is no, we cannot do this recommendation, then say why. Put the reason in writing. Let the public see it. If the answer is yes, it's already been done, then show the work. If the answer is yes, but we need to rewrite it so it fits state law or the charter, then bring the rewrite forward. That is not radical. It's just follow through. And I want to say this too. I do not think that city staff should be treated like villains in this conversation. I do not think planning board volunteers should be treated as villains either. There are good people doing hard work in a complicated city. But good people can still be working inside systems that need improvement. Those two things can both be true. We can respect staff and still ask for a better process. We can respect volunteers and still ask for training. We can respect the city charter and still ask whether the commission is providing clear enough policy direction. We can recognize legal limits and still expect serious public response. That is the tone I want to see here. Because when residents hear grand jury report, a lot of people immediately think that this is about scandal or corruption, and there is history here. There is a reason people are sensitive to this. But this particular item is really about the response. What happens after a report like this? Does the city turn it into clear action steps? Does the public get to participate? Do we track progress? Or do we just have another tense discussion and move on? That is the part I am watching. At the last meeting, there was frustration from some commissioners about how much time is being spent on grand jury reports. I understand the fatigue, I really do. But public trust work is city business. Making sure people understand how decisions are made is city business. Making sure planning and development procedures are clear is city business. Making sure recommendations are evaluated in public instead of disappearing into the background is city business. So for me, this is not the city dragging us backwards. It is about deciding how we move forward in a way people can actually see. And if a recommendation is impractical, say that. If it's illegal, explain that. If it's already done, show that. And if it is worth doing, bring back a timeline. That is how you take the emotion out of it and put the work in front of the public. So how can you get involved? Item 27 is scheduled for the morning session on Thursday, June 4th. That session begins at 9 a.m. at City Hall. Read the resolution. Read the grand jury report if you have time. Watch or read about the May 7th discussion so you understand the legal concerns and the different viewpoints. And then, if this is something you care about, show up. Watch the meeting or send thoughts to the mayor and commissioners before the meeting. You do not have to be an expert. You can ask simple, useful questions. Which recommendations are actually being considered? Which ones does the city believe are already complete? Which ones does the city believe are illegal or impractical? Will there be workshops? Will the public be able to track progress? Will each recommendation come back for a clear vote? Those are all fair questions. And that is the whole point of why I do these breakdowns. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to make sure you have what you need to be a part of the decision. The more people understand what's happening, the better this city works. And that's the kind of leadership that I believe in.